but then there was running on the roof. And then what really got me freaked out was when the cabin started getting lifted off the blocks it was on and rocked. So I started in filmmaking back in the 80s, and I started a TV show, by the way, that's still on the air today, which is kind of cool. Since it was my first TV show, it's actually on the second generation of hosts, because his daughter has taken over hosting now. But it was a wildlife show, and kind of a magazine style wildlife show. And I was up in the Arctic filming for that show, and then came across big footprints. And there's a little bit more to the story than just finding big footprints, but I was up trying to film a giant lake trout that I had actually seen one. They've been reported, 6 feet plus in length. That's pretty big for a trout. And so I was up there with underwater equipment and so on. But we actually had to stop, Linda, to take a potty break. And as we got out of the boat, we noticed there were some impressions, in the sand on the beach. And so we just started following those footprints. And I had already done a lot of bear research and knew they weren't bear prints. I mean, they were very, very much human-like, but much larger and deeper. And you got to realize we were up on a lake called Selwyn Lake, 6.5-hour float plane ride, as I remember, getting dropped off pretty much in the middle of nowhere. And in fact, there were not even any natives living up in that area anymore. But anyhow, so we followed the footprints, and they led us up into a small stand of stunted black spruce trees. And there was a footprint. This is where it was life-changing. There was a footprint in front of the tree trunk, and then one right directly behind it, which meant only one thing. It stepped over that tree, that stunted tree. And there was no way, somebody my height, or even 7 foot, or even 7.5, you could do that. This was a huge animal or creature that stepped over the tree. And that was basically the bottom line. It was a life-changing moment for me as a wildlife researcher. I went, something made these tracks, and I want to know what it is. And so that's kind of the beginning of my journey.
Wow. So, so you were in film long before you got involved in some of these strange creature research and talking about those. Did you continue doing that wildlife research and run into anything else of that nature?
Well, yeah, I mean, I continued wildlife research. I still do it. But generally, most of my focus kind of shift to the Bigfoot mystery. And it's still, to me, the biggest mystery on the planet, because, the subject is fueled every day by news sightings, very credible witnesses, strange things that happen. And of course, I've had my own experiences. But nothing strange has ever happened like that while I was in the process of filming, beavers or, those kinds of things. So.
Well, tell me about your personal experiences with this. My audience really enjoys hearing about that. In part, I think a lot of them have had their experiences and they like validation. They're not alone out here in the world with these crazy, thoughts and ideas about what's happened to them. So what has happened to you?
So after the footprint find, I went off and got obsessed with the topic, got a hold of Matt Moneymaker. And then, of course, we started pitching Legend Meets Science, and we can get into that a little bit later. But so my actual sighting didn't happen until much, much later. Actually, when I wasn't even doing research, I was driving back, and I was driving with a vet in my car, just coming back from up north, and it was late. And we're driving, and in the headlights is illuminated what we think is maybe a moose standing with his butt to us, right on the side of the road. As we got closer, we could see this, what we still thought was a moose moving its antlers back and forth, which I thought was odd. And then as we got closer, we realized what the antlers were shoulders and hands and arms. And it was just basically doing kind of a hula dance, a hula motion back and forth with its hands. And then we realized it was drying off as we got closer. You clearly see the wind blowing the hair, and you could see how big this thing was, and you could clearly see that it was partially wet at the bottom of the creature, and it was just drying off in the wind. And of course, when you see something like that, you have no idea what to think. You have no idea what it is. I think Yvette was thinking like a snuffleupagus, as her brain was going, because of the very kind of wavy hair it had and the long hair hanging off its arms. But we just drove right on by, slowed down, and there was no shoulder for me to pull around. And there was another curve. Actually, it was a very dangerous road. And went on our way and then pulled over eventually and looked at the GPS map. And of course, there was a stream that ran right into Mille Lacs Lake right there, and a state forest. So the location made sense.
That was your one and only sighting of
no, it wasn't. We've had actually I've had a total of 3 with her.
Well, let's hear about.
Yeah. They've all been pretty non-eventful road crossings, or road sightings, I should say. One was we were driving probably only about 5 miles from my home here, and we were driving in an area where there's been numerous sightings. In fact, some people that work for me have had sightings back there. And it's in an area, Linda, where all of the lakes are eutrophicated, meaning they're very swampy. No one wants to live on them, okay? Let's put it that way. But they're wilderness. They're wilderness lakes. They're very old lakes. They're filled in. And then a hunting club bought, literally 500 acres on one lake and 500 on another. But all these lakes are connected. But every year there's sightings near these lakes. And so there's quite a corridor of forest. And here we saw, once again, not expecting it, just coming back from another city, we see this creature charging through the alders, just charging right through the middle of these small trees. And of course, we could see its shoulders sticking up above the alders. And the first thing that struck me was the odd salt and pepper hair. I've never seen anything so cool, because it was just extremely salt and pepper looking, white with black or gray with black. And it just kept on walking. And once again, we were just like, what are we looking at? We're trying to get a handle on what we're seeing, because it wasn't 10 feet from our car. And this thing is just plowing through the alders, and then it steps off into the, goes to the right, steps off into the wilderness where we didn't get a look at it. And that was the end of that one. But once again, Linda, if you ever have a chance at seeing something like this and it catches you unexpectedly, you're not looking for it, you're just driving, you're minding your own business. It is such a shock to the system in your brain that you don't really even know how to react. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can only imagine. I haven't had personal experience myself, but it can leave some people just completely traumatized, and other people they become a bit obsessed to try to find out what it is, or try to find another one. So how did you respond?
You just you can't stop thinking about it. I still think about it constantly. We talk about it amongst each other. I mean, it was clearly a Bigfoot. But all of our sightings, the creatures have had their back to us, or it's been from the side. So you're not really getting a great look, at the face. Because right about the point where we could have really gotten a look at the side of the face, it veered off to the right. And so you're not really getting, you're just constantly seeing Bigfoot back and butt.
Yeah, and so you're only seeing basically the structure of it.
Right.
The facial descriptions seem to be very detailed oftentimes
Yeah.
when people
Yeah.
have a very close encounter. And I think that
So,
would almost be scarier than like what you saw, where you do have at
right.
least a buffer of the car and some distance between the two of you, perhaps.
Yeah. And you're driving 35, 40 miles an hour, but it never fails to where your brain goes through this, what am I looking at? Shuffling through. Am I looking at a man? No. Am I looking at this? No. Am I looking at a bear? No. I mean, it's really interesting how the brain won't accept um, the sighting, you know, and then you get home and you're baffled and you start talking yourself out of it, and then you realize, well, it couldn't have been anything else, it just couldn't be.
Right. So in your filming and the shows that you've created, I know you've talked to, I'm sure certainly you've talked to a lot of people who've also had experiences.
Oh
What have
yeah.
you discovered or heard from them that stood out the most to you?
Well, I'm in the field so much myself. Probably one of the most interesting things that I've connected the dots on with my own research is a witness that had seen a creature and then started doing research and started finding these very complex stick structures, and then noted that they were finding blue objects in these structures. Like one object could have been a bottle label, a bottle cap, but every time it was blue. Well, I had already been noticing that myself. And I started at this point thinking, oh, that's interesting. I put that in the back of my head. But then you find 5 more, 6 more, 7 more. It never ends. And you're like, this has been 30, 40 times. So I thought, well, what can I do with this information? And then I did hear some other people mention the blue. So I started for Legend Meets Science 2, which I'm working on right now through some generous funding on a Kickstarter campaign. That one of the sections we're doing is trying to collect the skin oil, the sebums, surface skin lipids, because they seem to leave a very waxy, thick, very detailed handprints on car windows often when people are camping, cabin windows, camper windows. And for years, I've been looking at these photos. And then I realized, well, maybe this is kind of a different substance. Maybe it's thicker. Maybe it's got more wax in it than humans or gorillas and blah, blah, blah. So, and then it hit me. Oh my God, maybe there's got to be sloughed off skin cells in the sebum. Why are we not collecting this for nuclear DNA? So we started a project that's going on right now. In fact, today, we have a real exciting thing going on because so we started putting these out, and the first one got taken. I mean, bolted to a tree. I don't know if you can see this picture. See this bolt, Linda?
Mhm. Yes.
There we go. It's pretty big, right?
Yeah.
And so you take and you screw 2 to 4 of those in a tree with a blue piece of plastic. And the reason I decided on blue plastic was, one, I thought, well, it might be their favorite color. And two, why are they touching these car windows constantly and house windows? I thought, well, maybe they think it's water, or maybe, it's that subtle reflection that they would only see in the forest in a puddle. And they're confused by it, maybe curious, maybe they're very tactile. And it's smooth. There's nothing glossy in the forest, like nothing. So maybe that's why they're touching it. It's very different. Okay. So we started putting these plastic plates up in remote areas. And literally the first one we put up was ripped off the tree, literally ripped off the tree 10 feet up. Now you saw the screw, the force it would take to rip a piece of Lexan off a tree that's 10 feet up. And who's walking around in a forest with a stepladder? Not many people. So we put up 4 more. Everyone was taken within 4 days, ripped from the trees in a whole nother area, 100 miles away. So then we put another one up, and I thought, well, let's put a GPS tracker, because I was just hoping they would touch them. I had no idea that they would actually take them, because it doesn't do me any good if they're gone. I can't collect the sebum, and it's, I can't photograph, I can't do anything with it. So we put a GPS tracker in the corner, and literally yesterday evening, I look at the GPS because we could see it on satellite, and all of a sudden it was 5 miles away. So the crew is literally up right now as we speak, and I've hired one of the best drone operators actually in the world, and he's up there too, and they're all racing up there to try to possibly recover the plastic, because it's got a tracker on it. And maybe, what if this creature has actually brought this to its home base? I can give you a lot of what ifs. What if there's a family there? Because it brought this thing to the middle of a forest where there is nothing. There's no ATV trails. There is nothing. It's like the middle of a very, very dense forest in northern Minnesota.
That's amazing. And what a brilliant idea with the tracker to be able to locate this thing. And all of the others, they're all gone, right? All 4 that you put out.
6. No, 6 now are gone. All within a week, 6 are missing. And once again, I stress they're bolted to a tree with. But not with 1 screw, up to 4 of these, no less than 2. Now, you could hang a 300-pound man off them. And they're very high up, so we have something, I think, that's kind of real-time exciting happening. And we don't know. I mean, of course, I'm setting myself up to be let down. But on the same token, what's happened, I think, is historic, if you know what I mean, from a standpoint. If it's a Bigfoot, if one's ripped that off the tree, and if it's walking with that piece of plastic, that blue plastic, and a tracker on it, that's never been done before.
So according to the GPS, the thing was, they're no longer moving it. It's in one spot at this point. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yes, but it moved yesterday 5 miles.
Yes.
Yep.
And I assume you're keeping track of if it's moving anymore. If it's
sure, correct. Yep.
Right?
Yeah. Yep. And it was funny too, because the tracker surprised me in how much battery consumption there was. I mean, it's only about maybe 1 inch square, but it has to send a satellite signal up to communicate with the satellites every hour or so. And it drained our batteries. So we're getting, so where we're at right now is down to 7% battery. So it's scary. So you can see, I can feel everything slipping between my fingers again.
Is there any type of battery that would enable this thing to stay longer if you do it
Sure,
again?
yes. So what we've talked about yesterday was putting a power bank connected to the tracker that would purposely just fall off if it was disturbed. So it would keep the GPS tracker charged longer. Does that make sense?
I just feel privileged to be hearing this.
Yeah, this is real time.
As we speak, real time, exactly.
Yeah, this is real time going on right now. So I'm on pins and needles.
What else have you done? What other ingenious ideas have you done? That's just so fascinating to hear some of these things.
Oh, gosh. There's so many. I never know where to start. Things that we're doing. For instance, well, let's say so this thing dragged one of these boards into the middle of the forest. Obviously, the next step is somebody has to go there solo camping with microscopic cameras outside the tent buried, with a little monitor that they can view under their sleeping bag. Somebody's going to go out there alone. I already had one person volunteer today that they're willing to stay out there alone. We're doing things like here. I actually wrote up a list. I figured you might ask me, Linda. We feel that we're going to be analyzing 24 new categories of evidence. And I mentioned the skin oil. That's one, right? But there's 3 things we can do with the skin oil. One, it's going to have DNA in it. so we can scour it for skin cells. 2, there's going to be a chemical compound in the DNA. And they've already done all the studies on gorillas, bonobos, apes, orangutans, and humans on what are the chemical compounds in our sebum, our skin oil. And the proper scientific name is surface skin lipids. So let me minimize my screen here so I can get to my list. In these surface skin lipids can easily be collected, as I've just mentioned, right? It doesn't seem to be that hard. And for instance, I just got another sample in from the BFRO expedition where they had a creature come up and leave big handprints and thumbprints all over the window of a car. So, of course, they knew now because the word is getting out. Let's get it collected on Q-tips and let's photograph it really well because we can do DNA, the skin, the chemical compound, and then we have the forensic details. So, of course, I got a sample in and it came in FedEx 2 days ago. And that's just one example of a number of samples I have. But we're going to do things like really dig into the sounds, bring out new evidence that in some of the recordings that have been made. We're going to do obviously crazy, new high-tech field efforts that haven't been done before. One is with GPS trackers. And I don't want to get into all of them because I do want people to use all these techniques, but I want them to use them after we come out with the film. So they use them properly. They can really see how they're being done. But as an example, one of the field efforts is to work with a coyote researcher, tranquilize a coyote in a Bigfoot area, and then put a small, tiny camera on the coyote, but do it with a paper collar or a cardboard collar, and then cover that cardboard collar with coyote fur. So it's completely hidden. So if another person or an animal sees it, they're not going to notice it. But then when it gets moist, it will fall off and we'll have a tracker on it or a transponder, probably a transponder, so that we can find it, recover, and get the SD card. But the hope is that the coyote, because I've had a feeling for many years due to evidence I've seen that coyotes and Bigfoots have a symbiotic relationship. And it could be a non-agreeable symbiotic relationship, or it could be one where there's a very close, where they've actually, I hate to use the word tame coyotes, but where they've, interact with the coyotes. And I could tell stories about that all night.
Well, let's hear some of them. This is the first I've heard this correlation. So,
oh, really?
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. First time I personally had an experience with actually wolves and a Bigfoot. I was up grouse hunting with bow and arrow with a friend of mine, and we were up filming how to hunt grouse with a bow and arrow, right? Which is more challenging. And we were doing very well, and eating a lot of grouse, and we were we went to bed. He's in his cot, I'm in mine. Late at night, I'm awoken by what sounds like a whole pack of wolves running through our camp. And remember, we're in the wilds of Canada right now. And this big pack of wolves comes back. And we had spotted wolves earlier in that trip. So these were not coyotes, they were wolves. And so you can hear these wolves panting and running through our camp, one after another in a line. And right behind it, I'm hearing boom, 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 as literally the ground is shaking. If you've ever been into Canada in the boreal forest, the ground is very hollow up there. There's a lot of air spaces from the rocks, from the glaciers, and so on. But and so I just thought, well, what in the heck was that? And I mean, there was only one thing you could think. There was a bipedal animal chasing after a pack of wolves in the middle of the night in the wilds of Canada. So you can come up with all the explanations you want And you're probably not going to come up with one that's going to satisfy me at all, because this thing that followed those wolves was so heavy, the ground literally just shook like an earthquake with every step. Okay, so that was experience one. Of course, I had heard, other stories, but then we were out riding. We were on horseback on a Bigfoot expedition, not probably about maybe 80, 90 miles from my home. And we were on horseback, and there were four of us. And we had already rode through this one area, and we're coming back. And there's now a stink in here that was actually horrible. Smell like rotting flesh, dog feces, stinky skunk. It was absolutely horrible. And I was gagging. Everybody was gagging. And then we get a little farther down the trail, and the smell starts lightening up. And now we see what looks like a coyote laying in the middle of the horse trail, which we had already gone through earlier. But the coyote's not moving, but we can see his eyes blinking. And I thought, well, what, you know what I mean? What's this all about? So we all dismount. We go up to the animal, and it's very much alive, but it's paralyzed, cannot move. And we see big handprints in the fur. And then we can feel what appears to be a broken spine right below back of the neck. And of course, I'm thinking, this thing didn't crawl here. It was put here. And if it was put here and its back was broken, it was nearby something that could actually grab a coyote and pull on it and break its spine. And so, once again, you have to stretch a lot of facts to actually not wonder about what happened. You can say, well, it was hit by a car. No, there was no blood on the coyote. This coyote was so alert, he just could not move. And the fact that we had just rode through there, there's no way he crawled there. I mean, we had to dispatch the animal finally, but not a mark on it. No blood running out of its nose, no injuries on its face or on its body, no bullet holes, nothing. It just had a broken back that appeared to be stretched and broken by stretching. And of course, I don't know if you've heard all of the stories of even gorillas do it. They'll tear apart these gorilla hunting dogs. They'll grab a gorilla hunting dog and just literally snap them in two. And through the years, there's been numerous dogs found all over the country, and actually even been investigated by the FBI, where dogs have been found mutilated and actually torn right in two. So
well, that brings us to dangerous situations with these creatures. Have you ever been in a situation or interviewed people that feel like they have had an encounter of some sort or been in a situation that was terribly dangerous?
Sure. I've talked to, literally and probably throughout my life, I'm sure it's approaching 1,000 witnesses personally I've interviewed. I can just tell stories all night. A guy's poaching deer. He's admitting to me he was poaching deer. Sun isn't even up yet. It's pitch black. He's trying to get to his deer stand because he's poaching. And he gets slapped to the ground so hard, it knocked the wind out of him. Now, you know what it would take to knock this guy? He's like 6'4", to knock a 6'4" man. He's not a small guy, to the ground in the dark. And of course, that's been a common thing. There was a news story I saw not terribly long ago. In fact, we were looking for it the other day, and I will find it, but it's not easy to find anymore with all the YouTube new algorithms they have, where a man was, slapped to the ground. Well, I've talked to other people that have been slapped to the ground or been hit in the back with a big log, where they've gotten hurt. And I've been in situations where we've been in cabins and where the cabin's been attacked. And I've been in 4 or 5, I've almost lost count, 3, 4, maybe at least 4 cabin attacks now.
And what happened when your cabin was attacked? What occurred?
Well, I mean, once again, they're kind of hard stories just to tell in 5 minutes because they're quite involved. Um, First one happened at Snellgrove Lake in Ontario. And it's a quite involved story because I had been going to this particular remote cabin for at least 30 years and never had an incident ever. To the point I was even going alone up there. I was going alone and sleeping outside if it was hot. No gun. That's how confident I was, because up there it's so remote in the middle of the wilderness. You're getting dropped off by a float plane. There's no wildlife to even be seen. Wildlife likes the edges. There's not much wildlife in the middle of a forest. I never saw anything. Never saw a deer, I should say a caribou. There are no deer up there. There's reindeer. Never saw a reindeer. Never saw a bear. Never saw a wolverine. Never saw a cougar. Never saw anything. Only saw one bird. Can you imagine going up there for 5 days and seeing one bird? That's how confident you are that you're alone. And one time I decided to bring, I always brought buds up there, and friends, male friends. And finally we thought, it's three of us best friends. Let's bring our daughters up. And so we brought our daughters up that were quite young. I know it was kind of dangerous because no cell phone signal. There's no radio waves up there. There's no way to get a signal out if you're hurt. So it's dangerous, but they let us go. And we went up there, and my daughter, Dakota, started making what sounded like monkey sounds in the boat. And I said, "Why are you doing that?" She goes, "Well, it helps me catch walleyes. It's my walleye call." So I thought, oh, okay, whatever. So she was doing that one day, and we were in a stream, and we were coming out to the main lake. And she was doing these monkey sounds, and all of a sudden there was a wood knock right by the boat. And remember, this is an area I've been going for 30 years. Never heard anything too weird. And you know what I mean? It's just pretty much my happy place. But all of a sudden I get a wood knock right by the boat. So we're like, oh, geez. I'm thinking, well, maybe there are Bigfoots up here. So we decided to do wood knock that night. So we did a wood knock. We got an immediate answer, 50 to 100 feet away. Maybe even as close as 20 feet was an answer. Real distinct loud wood knock. And so one of the little girls in our thing, I told her, I said, why don't you just lob some small rocks towards where the wood knock came from? So we ended up with a pebble exchange that went on for an hour. Just pebbles coming back and forth, landing at our feet, throwing another one in. And then we did one more wood knock. It didn't answer. Everybody was tired. It was like 4 a.m. at this point. So we everybody goes in the cabin. Everybody hits the hay. I stay up because my adrenaline's kind of going. And I'm reading an old magazine by a candlelight. And all of a sudden I start yawning. I get tired. I'm going to go to bed. I go up to the sink that pumps water out of the lake with a solar powered pump, but there's solar powered lights above me, fluorescent. I flick the switch and I light up, and I'm facing the forest. And remember, we're 500 miles from the nearest road. And all of a sudden screaming starts happening. The cabin starts getting, rocks thrown at it, logs thrown at it. And they're screaming out there from more than one animal or creature, whatever you want to call. Because once again, I didn't see what made the sounds. So I'm never 100% sure. But then there was running on the roof of the cabin, which is tin. And then I look up and there's a skylight open. And I remembered how to shut the skylight because I wasn't the one that opened it. And I looked for this long pole, and first thing was to get that skylight closed because I kind of envisioned something dropping into the cabin. The screaming continued, the rocks, the smashing of the walls on the cabin. And then what really got me freaked out was when the cabin started getting lifted off the blocks it was on and rocked. And that's when I ran immediately into Vlad's room and started just pounding on his back as hard as I could. He would not wake up. It was like he was unconscious. I ran into Joe's where his bunk was, and I started pounding on Joe. And when I started pounding on Joe, he didn't wake up either, and then everything quit. So that started a whole series of cabin attacks just at that one location, including one where, even Jeff Meldrum experienced it up there. So.
That sounds a lot like some poltergeist type of experiences where things, move and sounds happen.
Yeah.
And I know you're correlating it with the flesh and blood, Bigfoot.
Sure. I have no idea. I didn't see anything.
Well, so speaking of poltergeist type experiences, have you experienced anything somewhat paranormal around the Bigfoot research or just in other areas?
Yeah, I mean, I could tell a few stories that have happened, at the house here. I don't know if they're related at all, but there was a time where, everybody settled in, sleeping, it's late, and all of a sudden I hear what I thought were my daughters running up and down the hallway, banging on the doors. And I thought, what in the world are they doing? Because, as kids, sometimes they can stay up late and be giggly and get goofy. So I'm getting my robe on. I'm getting ready to go out there. Get my robe on. I go out there, and there's nobody in the hallway. It's like quiet. So I walk into Dakota's room, and she's sleeping. I thought, ooh, this isn't good. So I walk into my other daughter's room, and she's sitting up crying. And obviously she heard the noise and she said, something's in my room. And so I comforted her and I said, what did you hear exactly? She said, something was pounding on the doors and running in the hall. She heard exactly what I heard. And she was really freaked out and scared. So that would be, I guess, in your poltergeist category.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Scary. It's scary. It really
scary,
is.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard of that type of story before. What about the orbs and things? You've spent a lot of time in nature, a lot of time, photographing this. You hear a lot of talk about the lights, the orbs, and it seems that it has some intelligence to it. What have you experienced regarding that?
Okay, well, I've seen many orbs, daytime and even actually at night, even in the day. If you ever seen an orb in the day, it's really interesting. So let's see. I've seen obviously lots of these glowing balls, not only in the forest, but actually, pretty good size, but usually they're above the treetops. And they're just kind of silently moving slow. And they just eventually go out of sight. They're not airplanes. They're, maybe 30, 40 feet above the trees. I've seen sparking ones that way, with sparks coming off like Buck Rogers, like they're dying, which is really interesting. We've seen them colored ones. The last ones we saw were bright Pepto-Bismol pink, 2 of them that were traveling together. I'd never seen anything that color before in the sky. We've had orbs, cause metal to I live on a lake and all the docks were bouncing one night when an orb came over. The docks were all violently bouncing. The car alarms were going off in the neighborhood. The swing sets were going back and forth. It was right out of like a Steven Spielberg movie. And once again, I wouldn't tell these stories if, Yvette hadn't witnessed them with me. It's quite weird. So I don't know. There's no way I can connect an orb to a Bigfoot. It's always possible. I mean, I have seen orbs, many orbs up at the Snowgrove cabin. And the Snowgrove cabin is isolated enough to know there's no other campers up there or anything like that. And one time I brought my oldest son, who I'm going to see tomorrow. we were at Snell Grove, and he was about 18, and a red orb came up from an island that's real nearby the cabin, came up to above the treetops and went right back down again. And we witnessed that. And he looked at me and he goes, "Now I know why you come up here."
So what do you think about the phenomena of locations possessing some kind of a electromagnetic field or something like that, like Skinwalker Ranch or some of these other places around the world that seem to have some kind of a frequency that promotes more unusual things happening?
Well, that certainly could be. I just, obviously they're researching. I know Brandon and crew are all researching that, and I know Bob Bigelow did before him. And what they've established is there is a phenomena. Long ways from figuring out what it is.
That's true.
I have established in my life that there is phenomena through video, through film. In fact, that I'll tell you one more orb story that's kind of freaky. It's actually, if people want to see it, it's in the open now, and I just showed it to the producer. I wasn't trying to sell it to him, and I never did sell it to him. But I don't mind if he uses it. He's a friend of mine, but he produced the Paranormal Highway, and it opens up with a black orb going through the sky, through some clouds. I filmed that right in front of my house.
Really?
And the story on that one is pretty freaky. It's actually very freaky, and it's been life-changing for a vet, in not a good way. So we were out on our deck, and we just were going to catch some rays, and we're literally, oiled up or whatever with suntan lotion. It was a beautiful day. And I get out there, and I'm not even there 2 minutes, and she starts screaming. And I look at her, which is obviously the first reaction that you do when someone's screaming. And she couldn't even really talk. And she's pointing to my right. And there is a black orb, 5 feet, 6 feet, 7 feet from my head. And it's just sitting there, and it's changing shape. It's like breathing and going from a triangle to an oval to a circle. And it was the blackest thing I've ever seen. And it had like a texture on it, very unique texture. And so I'm like, oh, gee, okay. And my cell phone's right next to me. So I carefully get it, real slow, just kind of, trying to be all nonchalant about it. And it's bright sun, so it's hard to, see the buttons, turn it on, think I got it on video. And as I'm swinging my arm, it thing shot to the clouds that quick. And I'm now filming. I can't even see it, but I'm just filming in the direction I saw it shoot. And that's that story. I mean, that's the end of it.
Wow.
Oh, I should say, we went out in my garage, and yes, I did capture. You could see how tiny it was. But then we came back out, and we both see one shooting out of the water, out of the lake. And this one went from the water directly up to the clouds. And it wasn't that big. I mean, we're talking beach ball size. Jet black.
Yeah, you've had a lot of experience with orbs, and that seems to be a common thing among a lot of the people that I interview.
Is it really? Yeah.
Spend time in the forest, or people have encounters, and even they see these, whether they're having a Bigfoot encounter or not, or some kind of Bigfoot phenomena, which is often sound more than it is even a sighting. But
yeah. Well, I'm definitely convinced, Linda. I mean, they're real. I don't know why I've had so many orb incidences, why me and Yvette especially have had so many. Because, it's just one of those things that you'll go on a stretch where you'll see a bunch of them. Now, it's been quite a while. We haven't seen anything. So you kind of wonder what that's about, too. But we don't see as many because, one, my star watching buddy won't go outside, or kind of refuses, because she's seen enough stuff. It makes her afraid, because she realizes that orb, the color it was, black, that you would never see it at night.
in all your years of filming, what are your favorite things that you have put out there that and why?
I would say one thing that was very exciting because I got to share it with the whole world was I figured out a way to put a camera system in a wild bear den up on the Canadian border. And my goal was to film the birth of wild black bears and the care. And we accomplished that. And there were schools all over the world watching, kids. And that was probably, I think it was my finest moment, one of them. And there's now, we ended up publishing a scientific paper. So I co-authored a scientific paper on the birth and care of black bear cubs, which had never been seen or documented, because we documented it over the entire winter. And then maybe my next thing is we filmed, the world's first Architeuthis, which is really a team effort. It's one of those things that you call it a multi-step effort, by the way, which is exactly how I think Bigfoot will ever be filmed. It'll be something that's just so complex. It's a number of multi-steps. And the squid that we got, the Architeuthis ducks, was the first time that species had ever been filmed in the wild. And it was a number of steps. And during those steps, anything can go wrong. And I remember History Channel rolling their eyes at me in a meeting, thinking, yeah, right, you're not going to, you know what I mean? You're going to pull those steps off. But that's what it takes to fool some of these animals, because some are far more intelligent. If you can only imagine how intelligent a giant squid is, it's almost alien-like intelligence, because 50 years and no other scientists, no other group, even with millions and millions and millions of dollars of funding, they never got any footage. And we did it on our first attempt.
Do you think it's because of your knowledge of nature in and of itself, plus the knowledge of filming, that you were able to do that?
It helped because I think because I've had such a wide variety of experiences. So I'll give you an example of that. So I was up in the Arctic, and I was up filming a virgin lake, basically, that had never been fished. In fact, the doc I did was called The Lake That Had Never Been Fished. And during filming, I witnessed a 6-pound lake trout, right? And I talked to the guide who saw it too, and he goes, "Oh, we see those once in a while. You're never going to catch one. They're too big. And they're real slow, and they're just cannibals." Well, then when I got back home, I talked to a fisheries biologist from Minnesota. And I had for years read about niches, animals getting out of their niches that can grow to bigger proportions. And actually, it was Al Lindner in a book that I had read when I was a kid that got me thinking about niches, because he talked about fish that if they get out of their niche, they can grow to enormous sizes. So I thought, well, I wonder if that same theory can be applied to other animals, including squid. Well, I just witnessed this trout, and I thought, well, why is that trout so big? And then it hit me. I bet it's a female. And I'll bet it's never laid eggs. And it's just absorbed its own eggs. And it just has never made it. And it's now become a cannibal, because it's the only thing big enough that in the lake that it can eat. So it's now even growing bigger. And because the lakes up there are very sterile, similar to the bottoms of these oceans, where they're deep, dark, and cold, nothing, there's no bacteria down there, that there's nothing to kill them. So I applied that same thing to the Architeuthis, thinking, why are some, probably most of them are small. And so what is the legend of the kraken? It's probably an animal that somehow got out of its niche, didn't breed, and stays down and lets all the smaller animals migrate up and down the water column, and it just stays deep and grows and grows and grows, because squid normally don't live that long. They live, a year to 2 years, 3 years, depending on what species. They don't live long, including octopuses. But if they don't breed, maybe they can live much longer, if that makes any sense. So that was the theory. And the theory was then to catch a squid, a big squid, and then put a camera system on it, because to create a Trojan animal. Same, just like my coyote we talked about, right?
Are you working on one of these Bigfoot plans to be able to figure out how to actually get more concrete evidence on that?
Oh God, yes. Oh yeah, yeah. You'd be amazed if we sat in private and you looked at this long list. I mean, it's many, many pages, and I'm checking them all off for this film. So it's basically, my back's to the wall at this point. I'm old now. I probably don't have that many years left of doing this kind of thing. And so this is maybe my last film, or maybe maybe it becomes a series, but we're really putting everything to it.
Well, I can't wait to see it. I have a feeling you've got a lot of good information there, and it's certainly a wonderful conceptual mind to be able to figure things out, to get that filmed and properly approach it.
Yeah, and I think it takes a lot of luck and a lot of just willing to do the extra work, to go to all these extra steps. I mean, think about it. Okay, so we tranquil. Well, first you have to call in a coyote, step one. Now you have to hit it with a tranquilizer gun. Now you've got to get this, you got to figure out all the technology with the transponder and the camera. You got to be able to miniaturize everything. You got to be able to get it on. So there's lots of money involved. Now you got to hope that everything doesn't just go haywire and the collar doesn't fall off on day one, and on and on and on. And then what are the chances this coyote's going to, be seen by a Bigfoot? It's all long shot.
It is a long shot, but so is seeing a Bigfoot, and you've had opportunity to see three. So,
but if my theory is right, that they work with these Bigfoots, they work in a symbiotic, non-cooperative or a very cooperative effort. If I do this coyote tagging or putting a camera on a coyote in a Bigfoot area, in fact, I just got permission to do this research in an area where there's been 17 sightings within a 2 square mile area.
Wonderful.
So that's where we're doing it.
So many of the sounds, because I get a lot of people that send me recordings of sounds they have, and there is a large amount of those that have the coyotes as well as these, what they consider Bigfoot sounds as well. Yep. And I'm sure you get the same.
Yep, correct. Yeah, no, there's and sometimes you hear things that sound like Bigfoot's imitating coyotes. I mean, if you can imagine hearing a coyote cough. I've heard a coyote cough before. So it's not a coyote, coyotes don't cough. So it's like a mimic coyote call. And then but the point is, the bottom line is, people have to start getting really creative. There's things you can do. There's camera systems, like you can get a motorcycle dash cam system. They're $150. They're waterproof. They're tiny. They have a record unit that's dummy proof. You've got 2 cameras that are recording simultaneously. It documents GPS location, and they're tiny. You can hide these things, and it records the sound. They're dummy proof. You give it power, they're running. They're recording. So really dummy proof. Things like that need to be done. People need to start carrying cameras that are maybe spring wind again. Old technology. Why? Because you just push a button to turn them on. There's nothing. You just squeeze the trigger. They're recording. People need to incorporate dash cams. They need to put dash cams in their cars, especially researchers. If we had more dash cams on researcher cars, we'd have more sightings, including my own. So I could kick myself on this dash cam problem. And I've had one in my car, but a lot of them aren't so well made, and they break. So then you're looking at buying another one. But, I've been guilty of that too. But, if we want to get footage, those are the things we have to do.
Well, we're going to wrap this up, but what else can you tell me? What would you like to end this with?
Well, I don't know. We're still looking for funding for Let You Meet Science too. For instance, today, just with a drop of a hat, I spent at least $2,000, $1,000 for a drone operator to go up. Tons of gas money for people, and it's expensive doing a film like this, especially when you have to do so much paint of labs and whatnot. But they can go to Hangar One Publishing, and that's Hangar with an AR, and then a numeral one Publishing, and there's a place people can donate to Let You Meet Science too, and there's a link if they want, and they get a lot of rewards back. And then obviously, I do a radio podcast every Wednesday on Untold Radio AM, and we have a network, a new network called Untold Radio Network, and there's shows that drop every week on the topic. So yeah.